the informed investor. Thanks to Century 21 agents, defying mediocrity and delivering extraordinary experiences.
Good thing for us is we have Charles Tarbey, the boss, on every Monday night. Evening to you, Mr. Tarbey.
Good evening, Mr. Price.
I couldn't believe that story I read in the Daily Telegraph today about blocks of land and how they're getting smaller and smaller and the great Aussie backyard is disappearing. You and I both grew up in a time, Charles, where, the house that I grew up most of my life in Seacombe Heights, south of Adelaide, we had a backyard big enough to kick a football. It was great.
Yeah, same for me, Steve. And of course, I did grow up in parts of Sydney, but then out in country town Crookwell, where you'd expect a bit of space. But it's true. I watched this change, and this is not a recent change. I started watching a suburb west of Sydney called Glenmore Park, where all of a sudden not only were the blocks of land smaller, but so too were the roads narrower. And instead of being able to park cars on either side, you can't do it. You now got cars parked on gutters and double park, all sorts of things going on. So this started happening a little bit, probably maybe 10 years ago. It's become a lot more prominent nowadays.
Yeah, they quoted the Daily Telegraph in this story today, and I don't know if you know this particular development. It's called Willowdale, a housing development. 47k southwest of Sydney.
Southwest of Sydney, yeah, I know.
They're building houses on blocks as small as 250 square metres.
I know, Steve, and if you go across to your great state where you were born in South Australia, that's correct, isn't it? Because I always get that place right, Aldinga wrong. I always get Aldinga wrong.
Aldinga, yep.
Aldinga, that's what I mean. They're actually doing the same now. Even in South Australia, they're building. They're creating small lots where you can build duplexes on or terraces on and nothing else. It's become very prominent nowadays because of the so-called issue we've had with the urban sprawl. Oh, God. I've lost my words tonight, my boy.
Or urban sprawl.
Thank you. The urban sprawl. And that's been one of the biggest issues. Some of the areas in Sydney itself, in southwest where you get closer, like areas like Fairfield and those areas, there are blocks of land there, the old, 50 by 150 type blocks. They're building duplex on all of those because of the size of the blocks of land compared to what else is going on around the traps. So 250 square metres is tiny, but sadly, the councils are letting it happen.
Well, I don't want to sound like an old fogey.
Maybe it's not their control.
I don't want to sound like an old fogey, but we had enough room in our backyard I can list what we had there. We had a Hills hoist, which stuck in the middle of the backyard. The old man had a tool shed down the back. There was a box trailer park there. There was an incinerator. There was fruit trees, a lemon tree, apricot tree, peach tree. Well, we didn't have a chicken pen, but that was just in suburban South Australia,
Yeah.
And that housing development was done in the late 50s. So, you could probably, you're right, you could build two houses on that block now.
And that's what you're seeing a lot of. I cut my teeth in Penrith when I first started selling real estate, and those blocks of land there were, the 18.5 metres wide and 20, 25, 30 metres deep in some cases. Now you look at the blocks of land that are out there, it is quite difficult to understand how people can accept that. And some of those areas I've spoken about just then in Penrith and Cambridge Park, Cambridge Gardens, all those now lend themselves to being able to be redeveloped. And I think that's what's going to be next. So I do get a little bit concerned that I saw that article about referring to it as a ghetto. And in some respects, I can agree.
CoreLogic released some figures today to show annual house price average falls over the past 12 months.
Yeah.
Sydney is sitting at 10.9%, Melbourne at 9.8%, credibly Brisbane 1.3%.
Yeah.
And Adelaide is, nowhere near that.
Hardly any change at all. But isn't that exciting though, Steve, when you think about it? They were talking about massive declines in prices. I actually saw that article and thought of it as a really positive article because I've got some data that people at CoreLogic were kind enough to give to me recently that showed that, and there's talk about prices dropping significantly over a period of time, something like $260 billion we've lost in home values of recent times. And the data from CoreLogic shows that in the last 5 years, there's been 1.7.5 trillion in growth in real estate prices. And so this issue of prices dropping, but they're dropping slower than they were before, a lot of people are still not factoring in how much money has been made by property holders over the same period of time.
And people can't have it both ways, can they, Charles? Because we were forever talking about how do we get young people into the first home buyers market? How do we make real estate cheaper for people who've not been able to get into the market? Now, it's happened.
It's happened, and this is a great opportunity for first-home buyers. The affordability issue is changed in their favour, particularly in areas like Perth, where prices had declined quite considerably. But even in parts of Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, all of those areas have still got very, very good affordability opportunities. Interest rates are still low. Interest rates are looking like they might even drop. So I think there's a great chance, and I was speaking to somebody recently about this, and they said, what do you need to say to young people? And the answer to that is just get ready, be ready, because the opportunity will arrive, and when it does, you want to be able to get onto that opportunity. And I think that time has arrived for a lot of first-home buyers.
Yeah, I mean, save like hell and get as big a deposit as you possibly can, and hopefully put yourself on a foot on a piece of real estate sometime between now and the end of this year, because you're never probably going to see, well, not never, but for a long time, you're not going to see prices, certainly in the areas where we're on air, in Brisbane, Sydney and Melbourne, as good as what they are now.
Steve, there's only one caution. A lot of people say get into the marketplace when you can. I encourage a lot of younger people to make sure that they get into the right marketplaces, because sometimes they buy based on rental return and they get no capital growth. So it's really important, if you're going to get into the market, you get into the right areas. Absolutely critical.
Yeah, and look, in these figures, incredibly, you see Canberra for the last 12 months actually went up 3.1%, and Hobart also went up 6% for the year. So there are diamonds in the rough.
They certainly are, my friend, and I think Canberra you and I tipped that area, and that I think is going to be sustainable.
Great stuff, Charles. Thank you very much for that. I'll talk to you next week.
Thank you, Steve.
Charles Tarby's chairman of Century 21. So those figures are fascinating, but it's never been a better time to buy. I wouldn't have thought. The time to buy.